chosen one, there is a reason this message reached you at this exact moment. It is not random. It is not another video passing across your screen. Something in heaven has been waiting for the hour when your soul would finally be tired enough to listen. You have spoken too much to people who were never assigned to understand you. You have explained your heart to rooms that only wanted access to your weakness. You have defended your calling to ears that were already closed before your first sentence began. And every time you tried to prove who you were, something sacred inside you became a little more drained, a little more exposed, a little less protected. God is not angry with you for that. He saw the nights you rehearsed, the perfect response. He saw the messages you wrote and deleted. He saw the moments when silence felt like defeat, when not answering felt like letting them win, when your chest burned because the truth was sitting inside you with nowhere safe to go. But today, the Father is not asking you to fight harder. He is asking you to become still enough for Him to fight correctly. There is a season where speaking becomes obedience, but there is also a season where silence becomes warfare. And you, chosen one, are entering the second kind. This is not the silence of weakness. This is not the silence of fear. This is the silence of a person who finally understands that not every accusation deserves access to their voice. Not every misunderstanding deserves the energy of your explanation. Not every sacred thing God placed inside you is ready to be exposed to public opinion. What is forming in you now is too holy to be handled carelessly. God is hiding parts of your next chapter because the wrong eyes would not bless it. They would try to measure it, question it, drain it, or speak fear over it before it had roots. So, before you answer them, before you explain again, before you open your mouth to defend what heaven already knows, stop, breathe. Let your spirit return to the place where God's voice is louder than their noise. I know there is a tiredness in you that ordinary rest cannot fix. It is not just physical exhaustion. It is the kind of weariness that comes from being misunderstood for too long, from carrying a vision nobody else can see, from standing in the middle of your own becoming while people keep asking you to explain why you are changing. You tried to make them understand because a part of you believed that if you could just find the right words, they would finally see your heart. If you could explain your pain clearly enough, they would stop judging your process. If you could describe what God showed you in the secret place, they would stop treating your calling like imagination. But chosen one, some people were never assigned to recognize the seed. They will only understand the fruit. And this is where the wound began. You kept offering sacred pieces of yourself to people who only knew how to analyze, compare, and question. You gave them access to the early stage of your transformation, and then wondered why your spirit felt heavy afterward. You shared what was still tender, still forming, still covered in the fingerprints of God, and their doubt touched it before your faith had finished protecting it. That does not mean you were foolish. It means you were human. You wanted confirmation. You wanted one person to say, "I see it too." You wanted someone to make the loneliness of your calling feel less heavy. But heaven is teaching you something now. Some confirmations are too small for what God is building in you. Human approval can comfort the flesh, but it cannot carry divine assignment. This is why silence is not punishment. Silence is separation. Silence is God pulling your voice back from places that were draining your power. Silence is the Father teaching you that what He whispered in private does not need to be validated in public. There are things inside you that will grow only when nobody is clapping, nobody is questioning, and nobody is watching. There are signs that heaven gives before it pulls a chosen one into a deeper silence. They do not always come loudly. Sometimes they come through the strange heaviness you feel after speaking too much. Sometimes they come through the emptiness that follows a conversation you thought would bring relief. Sometimes they come through that quiet conviction in your chest that says, you should not have shared that yet. The first sign is this. Every time you explain your calling to the wrong person, your certainty becomes weaker afterward. Not because the calling changed, but because you exposed something sacred before it had enough roots. What felt alive in private suddenly feels small in public. What burned with clarity when it was only between you and God becomes clouded when it meets the opinions of people who were never given the grace to understand it. The second sign is the compulsion to defend yourself. When someone misreads you, accuses you, ignores your heart, or twists your intentions, something inside you cannot rest until you answer. You replay the conversation at night. You imagine what you should have said. You prepare paragraphs in your mind. You feel almost forced to correct the story before it spreads any further. But that pressure is not always wisdom. Sometimes that pressure is the wound asking for control. The third sign is that your prayer life has become filled with words but empty of stillness. You talk to God, you explain to God, you ask God, you remind God, but you rarely sit before Him with nothing to prove and nothing to request. The silence feels uncomfortable, almost wasteful, as though a faithful person should always be speaking. But God is not waiting for more sentences. He is waiting for surrender. Chosen one, these signs are not here to shame you. They are here to locate you. They are heaven's way of showing you that your mouth has been working harder than your trust. And when God reveals that, it means He is ready to heal it. To understand the silence God is asking from you, we have to look at a man who had every right to answer, but chose not to. David was not a weak man. He was not a man without history, without authority, without proof that the hand of God was on his life. He had faced giants when others hid. He had been anointed when others were overlooked. He had carried rejection, warfare, betrayal, and still remained marked by heaven. But there came a day when David walked away from Jerusalem under the weight of humiliation. His own son had risen against him. The palace was behind him. The throne was behind him. The people who once celebrated him were now watching his life unravel in public. And while he walked through that painful road of loss, a man named Shimei stood on the hillside and began to curse him. He threw stones. He shouted accusations. He called David things that pierced deeper because they were spoken in front of witnesses. He did not attack David privately. He attacked him where others could hear. And that is often where the test becomes hardest for a chosen one. Not when pain happens in secret, but when your character is questioned where people can see it. David had soldiers with him. He had authority. He had people ready to defend his honor. One word from him, and the voice cursing him could have been silenced immediately. But David did something that only a person trained by God can do. He refused to use his power to protect his pride. He let the curse continue, not because the curse was true, but because he trusted that God saw what was happening. He understood that if he used his own voice to force vindication, he might interrupt what heaven was preparing to reveal. Chosen one, this is the test. Can you let God defend you while people misunderstand you? Can you remain still when you have the evidence, the words, the right, and the opportunity to answer? Because sometimes the strongest proof of your anointing is not how powerfully you speak, but how deeply you can trust God in silence. There is a word hidden inside the Psalms that most people pass over too quickly. It is not long. It does not explain itself loudly. It appears quietly, almost like a door placed between one breath and the next. The word is Selah. Selah is not merely a pause in music. It is not empty space between sacred sentences. It is a command for the soul to stop moving forward before it has absorbed what heaven just released. It means pause, weigh, lift, and let the truth fall deeper than your thoughts. It is God saying, do not rush past this. Do not consume this like information. Let it enter the bones. Let it reach the places your busy mind has been running away from. And this is where many chosen ones struggle, because you have learned how to keep going, but you have forgotten how to stop. You know how to survive pressure. You know how to answer messages, manage expectations, carry responsibilities, smile while bleeding, and keep functioning while your spirit is exhausted. But when God says, Selah, something inside you becomes restless. Silence feels unnatural. Stillness feels unsafe. The absence of words feels like losing control. That is not because you are faithless. It is because life has trained your nervous system to treat quiet as danger. In a world filled with noise, speed, comparison, deadlines, bills, betrayal, digital pressure, and constant performance, your soul has been taught to scan for the next problem. So when heaven invites you into stillness, your body does not always recognize it as peace. Sometimes it mistakes peace for emptiness. But chosen one, Selah, is where God begins to return you to yourself. It is the holy interruption that breaks the addiction to explanation. It is the sacred stop where your spirit learns that you do not have to keep producing words to remain valuable. You do not have to keep managing every perception to stay protected. When God calls you into Selah, He is not taking your voice away. He is cleansing it, strengthening it, and teaching it when to rise again. There is another kind of silence God is drawing you into, and it goes deeper than closing your mouth. Because it is possible to be quiet on the outside while still arguing on the inside. It is possible to say nothing, but your mind is still building a courtroom, still presenting evidence, still defending your name before people who are not even in the room. This is the silence God wants to heal, not only the silence of your lips, but the silence of the inner storm. The place where you keep replaying conversations, imagining responses, correcting accusations, managing how people see you, and trying to control an outcome that was never meant to sit in your hands. Chosen one, there is a kind of exhaustion that comes from speaking without sound. You may not send the message, but you write it in your mind 100 times. You may not confront the person, but you fight the battle in your chest every morning. You may not explain yourself publicly, but inwardly you are still begging to be understood, and God sees that hidden labor. He sees how much energy you spend trying to protect a version of the story that He already knows completely. The Father is not only asking you to stop talking, He is asking you to stop self-generating noise. Stop producing arguments that heaven did not assign you to carry. Stop rehearsing defenses that God never asked you to perform. Stop letting people who misunderstood you live rent-free in the sanctuary of your mind. This is where true stillness begins. Not when the world becomes quiet, but when your soul stops helping the world disturb you. And this will feel costly at first, because your mind has used overthinking as protection for a long time. It told you that if you kept analyzing everything, you would stay safe. But now God is teaching you a higher safety, the safety of surrender, the safety of resting under His authorship, the safety of knowing that what He protects does not need to panic. There is a silence where the soul finally stops arguing with pain and begins receiving peace. Now you need to understand that not every silence is the same. This is where many chosen ones become confused. They know God is asking them to be quiet, but they do not know what kind of quiet the season requires. So they either disappear completely, or they speak too soon, or they mistake avoidance for obedience. But heaven is more precise than that. The first silence is protective silence. This is the silence you practice when your name is being handled wrongly, when your intentions are being questioned, when someone has spoken about you without understanding the cost of your journey. Everything in you wants to correct them. Everything in you wants to bring receipts, facts, proof, and explanation. But protective silence says, I will not spend sacred strength trying to convince people who are already committed to misunderstanding me. I will let God decide when the truth needs to rise. This silence is not weakness. It is spiritual discipline. It is the moment you refuse to make your pain perform for an audience that was never assigned to heal it. The second silence is creative silence. This is the silence around what is still growing. The dream, the calling, the vision, the next step, the thing God has placed inside you but has not yet released through you. Some things lose power when they are spoken too early. Not because they are false, but because they are unfinished. A seed does not need applause while it is underground. It needs covering, darkness, moisture, and time. The third silence is receptive silence. This is the silence inside prayer, when you stop arriving before God with only requests and begin arriving with room to receive. No performance, no pressure. No spiritual speech to prove your faith. Just presence, just openness, just the holy courage to sit before the Father without filling every empty space. Chosen one, these 3 silences will protect your assignment, purify your motives, and teach your spirit how to hear again. Now here is where this message becomes personal, because it is one thing to understand silence, but it is another thing to live it when your heart is burning, when your phone is in your hand, when your mind has already formed the response, when every wounded part of you is begging to be heard. The next time someone misrepresents you, do not rush to correct the story. Give it 24 hours. Let the first wave of emotion pass before you decide whether your voice is truly needed. In those 24 hours, you will discover something about yourself. You will see whether you were about to speak from wisdom or from panic. You will see whether your response was guided by the Spirit or driven by the fear of being misunderstood again. The next time God gives you a vision, do not announce it immediately. Let it stay hidden for a season. Let it breathe in the secret place. Let it grow without being touched by opinions, questions, jealousy, doubt, or premature celebration. What is born too early often struggles to survive the air. But what is carried quietly until its appointed time comes forth with strength that no criticism can easily break. And when you pray, begin differently. Before you ask, before you declare, before you pour out the list of needs sitting heavy on your chest, sit in silence. Let your soul remember that prayer is not only a place where you speak to God, it is also the place where God restores the part of you that has forgotten how to receive. But you must understand this clearly. Holy silence is not avoidance. Avoidance runs away because it does not want to feel. Holy silence stays present while choosing not to react. Avoidance is easy because it escapes the fire. Holy silence is costly because it stands in the fire without feeding it. So if your silence is costing you something, if it requires self-control, surrender, and trust, then do not mistake the pressure for failure. That pressure may be the sound of your old self losing control while your spirit learns obedience. There will come a moment in this silence when nothing seems to be happening. That moment is important. At first, silence may feel powerful because you know you are obeying. You may feel strong because you did not answer immediately, because you did not announce what God told you to protect, because you entered prayer without trying to control the conversation. But then days pass. The person who misjudged you keeps speaking. The vision you are carrying still has no visible proof. The door you believed was opening still looks closed. And that is when the real test begins. Chosen one, silence is not a transaction where you give God quiet for 3 days and He gives you public vindication by the 4th. Silence is a womb. It carries what cannot be rushed. It forms what would be damaged if exposed too soon. It teaches your spirit to stop measuring divine movement by human speed. David did not receive restoration the moment Shimei cursed him. Mary did not reveal the child before the appointed time. Joseph did not step from the prison into the palace because he explained himself better. There was a hidden process between the promise and the proof. And that hidden process is where most people lose patience because they want God to move in a way they can track, schedule, and explain. But heaven does not report its progress to your anxiety. God does not need to show you every invisible movement in order for it to be real. While you are silent, conversations can be shifting, hearts can be turning, doors can be preparing, evidence can be gathering, protection can be forming around what you thought was only delay. So when the silence begins to feel long, do not assume God has forgotten. Ask yourself whether your trust is still attached to a deadline. Ask yourself whether you are obeying only because you expected fast results. This season is teaching you a deeper faith, the kind that remains steady when there is no applause, no explanation, no visible rescue, and no immediate sign. The silence is working before you can prove it is working. Chosen one, before this message ends, I want you to understand what has truly happened while you were listening. This was not only about silence. This was about authority. It was about God taking back the power you had been spending in places that were never worthy of your voice. It was about heaven teaching you that your stillness can become more dangerous to darkness than your loudest defense. You are no longer the person who must explain every move. You are no longer the person who has to convince everyone that your calling is real. You are no longer the person who must bleed publicly just to prove that the wound existed. Something in you is being sealed today. Something in you is being gathered back from the noise, the opinions, the accusations, the pressure, the endless need to be understood. From this moment forward, your silence is not emptiness. Your silence is preparation. Your silence is protection. Your silence is a holy boundary around the next version of you. Let people misunderstand what God has not commanded you to explain. Let them question what heaven has not yet revealed. Let them speak over the surface while God is working beneath the foundation. You are being commissioned into a deeper kind of strength. Protective silence will guard you when your name is being tested. Creative silence will guard what is still forming inside you. Receptive silence will open the place in your spirit where God can pour what words could never reach. And when the old urge rises again, when your hand reaches for the message, when your mind begins rehearsing the argument, when your heart burns to prove the truth, pause, breathe. Remember who authors your vindication. Remember who protects the seed. Remember who speaks when the appointed hour arrives. You are not disappearing. You are being hidden with purpose. You are not losing your voice. You are learning the weight of it. Your silence has already begun its work.